Hello and welcome. I hope everyone can hear me. I'm Heather Coltman, the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at James Madison University, and I am delighted that you can be here and join us for the inaugural event of the Gandhi Center for Global Nonviolence. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the many scholars joining us from around the globe today to mark and celebrate both the International Day of Nonviolence and the launch of 2 books on Gandhi, edited by the late Terry Beitzel. With Terry's passing, JMU lost a devoted and well-loved faculty member. He was an inspiring teacher who encouraged his students to probe deeply, to follow the thread of each question and answer, and to accept responsibility for their learning. You all also know him as an accomplished scholar and author. Terry believed deeply in nonviolent forms of conflict resolution and relished his role as director of the Gandhi Center. In that position, he re-energized the center, generating more opportunities for JMU students and scholars to collaborate with community members right here in the Shenandoah Valley and well beyond. His wholehearted dedication to helping others was reflected in the ways that he walked his talk. And these are just some of the ways that Terry touched our lives at JMU. So in the spirit of recognizing and honoring Terry Beitzel, I want to welcome you again to this remarkable event. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome everyone, and thank you, Provost Coltman, for those wonderful words on behalf of our colleague and this great event. What a thrill it is to be here with people far and wide. The world, it turns out, is a surprisingly small place, and yet by the wonders of technology, we are able to gather here together to celebrate this book launch, the work of the center, and the work that everyone on this call does to support it. It's my distinct pleasure at this moment to introduce one of our distinguished guests. Bhikhu Parekh is an emeritus professor at the University of Hull and the University of Westminster. Prior to that, he was a centennial professor at the London School of Economics. He has also been a visiting professor at Concordia University, McGill, both in Canada, and Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania. He is the author of several widely acclaimed books in political philosophy, including Rethinking Multiculturalism and Debating India. He is a recipient of the Sir Isaiah Berlin Prize for Lifetime Contribution to Political Philosophy, BBC's Special Lifetime Achievement Award, and a Distinguished Global Thinker Award. He's also a Fellow of the British Academy and the European Academy, past President of the Academy of Social Sciences, and a member of the House of Lords. Welcome.
The memory of Professor Terry Beitzel, who died early this year at the relatively young age of 54. I extend my sincerest sympathies to his family, friends, colleagues, and students, and deeply regret that we'll miss his presence, his inspiring presence at today's book launch. An event devoted to Gandhi must begin by asking the most basic question. How do we read him? Who was he? How do we assess him? What criteria do we judge him? Because you can't define these criteria out of nowhere. They have to be embedded in our view of what he was doing, what his life was about. Was he a saint, as some people think he was? Well, yes and no. Was he a sant, which is an Indian word for saint, but not quite? Well, he was not, because he was too unworldly, too worldly, and brought God to earth in a way that sons don't. Was he a politician? Yes, he was, but also not, because he would never try to trick or outsmart his opponent in the game of politics. Was he a political and social activist? Well, yes, but he was not quite, because he led some very powerful and anti-British movements in India. Was he a thinker? Well, yes, he was, but not entirely, because his political engagements were so deep and complex that they left him little time to engage in sustained and contemplative exploration. I suggest that, like some very rare individuals in history, he was a class by himself, multidimensional. No single dimension could define him, but nor could all the dimensions define him, because these dimensions have to interact in order to generate Gandhi's identity. So I suggest that in order to define and understand him, we have to see these various dimensions of his identity in a complex, interactive relationship. And I end by giving a couple of examples. Take religion. He defined religion as moral government of the universe and saw himself as a religious person whose concern was to identify with God. Now, God, what does that mean? That means that all living beings, because God is present in all living beings. Which means what? Active love and service of your fellow human beings. How do you love and show your love and active service of your fellow human beings? In each age, the mode of self-realization is different. In ours, it is politics. So it talks about spiritualization of politics. So you can see how religion, a system of beliefs, get translated into a political practice. Or again, he distinguishes between religion with capital R, which is eternal, and religion with small r, which is historical and changing. Now, the religion with small r is, because it is historical and partial, it can never be perfect. And all the religions to which people belong are partial, and none of them is perfect, and none of them can be pretend to infallibility. And therefore, dialogue between them is the only way in which they can make progress. And the final example is one of thinking. What does thinking mean for him? Thinking is always grounded in experience. The experience that you have of anything in life, you start thinking about it, analyzing it, and arrive at a body of ideas. But your experience changes. And as it changes, your thinking changes. And you grow from what he calls truth to truth. So you act on the basis of beliefs that you have, of which you feel certain at a given point in time, but at the same time, you recognize that those beliefs might turn out to be untrue when you move from one truth to another. So what we find in Gandhi, in one last sentence, is a deeply religious man, but has nothing to do with fanaticism or fundamentalism. A Hindu, but open-minded to all other religions. An Indian, but also cosmopolitan, open to the globe. A human being, but also identified with non-human beings, with the entire sentient world. In taking this view, Gandhi provides the basis of a new, global, environmentally friendly ethics and politics. And that is what these two volumes that are being launched today are about. I commend them to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Parekh. And now we have Mr. Tushar Gandhi, the great-grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. He's a prominent human rights activist from Mumbai, India. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I should have been thanking Professor Beitzel and Professor Langare for inviting me to participate in this very important book that the two of them compiled and edited. Unfortunately, Professor Terry Beitzel is not in our midst for us to be able to express our gratitude to him, but as Bapu in his life exemplified, that the cause is much greater and more important than the individual. I think the legacy that Professor Beitzel leaves behind in the form of course, there'll be a legacy of all his life work, but also these two very important books that he was part of compilation and things, and through such difficult times that he steered them, bringing all so many personalities together, making them contribute to it. I think that is something that will remain as his lasting legacy, and I find myself to be very privileged to be a part of it. And this is someone who is privileged for having everything, for privileged to have had the birth in the family, because without that birth, I would be a nothing, nobody. I wouldn't have been able to be in this August gathering also. So my life has been a continuing privileges, success of privileges. And but I accept that, because as my grandmother taught me in my childhood, that I had taken roots, I had sprouted under the shade of a massive tree. And I was always going to have to live in that shade. I was never going to be able to move out of that shade. And it was up to me whether I thrived in the safety of that massive tree or considered it a curse and remained stunted and shriveled without growing to my fullest potential. That helped me live comfortably with the legacy I had inherited, with the knowledge that all the credit was of someone else, and I was just lucky. I had won the lottery of birth, and so I have been very comfortable accepting that and living in my own capacity. And so these are the kind of privileges, an invitation to contribute to a book, which is so important in today's time, because we live in the age of hypocrisy. And if you look at it, tomorrow the world will commemorate the International Day of Nonviolence. And so many, the UN, United Nations, has declared it through a resolution that 2nd October will be the Day of Nonviolence. And so many of the UN member states have signed on it. But neither the UN nor those who have signed that declaration, even for those 24 hours of 2nd October, honestly practice non-violence in the way they exist on this earth. Neither has the UN set down any kind of guidelines saying that, okay, you have signed on to accept 2nd October as the Day of Nonviolence, so here are the guidelines which you should implement, even only for the 24 hours of 2nd October. There's nothing of that sort. None of those states desist from violent actions, and not violent now, not only meaning strife or war or aggression, but violence in all its forms. Violence against nature, violence of thought, violence of policies, all in all its forms. They do not even desist for 24 hours to commemorate something that they all decided collectively to commemorate. This is the sad state of Gandhi's universal legacy and what we have reduced it to. And in such circumstances, a reaffirmation of faith in that ideals in the form of words becomes very important, because when there are no existing proofs of that legacy thriving, at least in words it is enshrined. And so in today's times, at least I feel that books are becoming very valuable, because we do not see the living examples of it in our midst. I think my generation will be the last generation which actually has witnessed living icons of nonviolence and peace living in our midst. I was too late to be born to witness Bapu, but after him, I have in my lifetime seen in flesh and blood many who have become as great icons of nonviolence and peace as Bapu was. But the generation of my children, unfortunately, will not have that luxury and that opportunity to witness those iconic lives living in our midst. And at those times, if legacies are explained to them in form of words and texts, I think they will be doing a great service to our future. And so that gives me great pride and satisfaction to be a part of such an endeavor, which where has enshrined the legacy of nonviolence and peace. And it's the release of these books on the eve of the Day of Nonviolence, International Day of Nonviolence, at least symbolically reaffirms our faith in peace and nonviolence. And so I congratulate both the James Madison University and the Shivaji University of Kolhapur for this collaborative uh, uh, venture of their two professors and the support that the institutions have given to those professors to to successfully achieve these things. And I also pay my homage to Professor Terry Beitzel for making this the last and most important work of his life. In gratitude to his memory, I fold my hands and thank all of you.
Thank you so much for those remarks. There's so much to think about. With that, I would like to welcome Professor Digambar Tukaram Shirke, the Vice Chancellor of Shivaji University in Kolhapur, India. Thank you.
Honorable Professor Lord Bhikhu Parekh, the renowned Gandhian philosopher, political thinker, and very senior academician. Mr. Tusharji Gandhi, the author and social activist. Dr. Heather Coltman, the provost of James Madison University. Dr. Robert Aguirre, the dean of the College of Arts and the later at James Madison University. Dr. Timmy Castle, the interim director at the Mahatma Gandhi Center for Global Nonviolence, James Madison University. Sylvia Whitney Beitzel, and colleagues and friends of Professor Terry Beitzel, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I express my deep sense of gratitude and feel privileged to participate in this virtual book launch of two books actually, Reflections on Mahatma Gandhi, The Global Perspectives, and Rethinking Mahatma Gandhi, The Global Appraisal, edited by Professor Terry Beitzel and Dr. Chandrakant Langare, on the life of and works of Mahatma Gandhi. The two books are an outcome of a book project dedicated to the life and works of Mahatma Gandhi on his 150th birth anniversary. I am very pleased to share my complimentary remarks on this occasion. At the very outset, I express my gratitude towards the provost of James Madison University for initiating this important book project on Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation, and iconic figure of Indian nationalism and renowned peacemaker of the world. I am of the opinion that Mahatma Gandhi, with his great humanitarian work and the principles of non-violence and truth, has become more relevant today against the backdrop of global terrorism and disturbed human societies. Today, while Celebrating the International Day of Nonviolence, I sincerely feel that Mahatma Gandhi's great experiments with truth and nonviolence, his ideas of social justice and human welfare, his educational and environmental concerns, self-reliance, Gram Swaraj, or grassroots level development are the pathways to solve the global problems and bring communal harmony in the world. I am rather gratified with the honor of being associated with this book project initiated by Professor Terry Beitzel and Dr. Langare. I have fresh memories of his visit to Shivaji University as a keynote speaker of a seminar organized by Yashwantrao Chavan Center for Rural Development. I still remember his scholarly and thought-provoking deliberations on Mahatma Gandhi's contribution to village development and welfare of farming community. He talked about how Gandhian model of rural and village development is useful to the entire village development campaign of the world. I was deeply saddened by his sudden and sad demise. I deeply express my deep sense of gratitude to Professor Terry Beitzel. I'm sure that his writings and research work will keep inspiring the scholars and students of their academic and research pursuits. I express my deep sympathies towards his family and friends. I appreciate the academic and research activities of Mahatma Gandhi Center for Global Nonviolence of this James Madison University. The center is doing a great work of peace building and Gandhian research. On this occasion, it would not be inappropriate to expect that the association between both these universities will go a long way, and our humanities studies departments should be tied up with the academic and research linkages of James Madison University. On behalf of Shivaji University, I assure that we will extend all essential support to the research projects, books translation projects, and other such related academic activities related to the study on Mahatma Gandhi. We wish to conduct in the near future an online symposium around these two books with academic collaborations and support of Gandhian centers in India and abroad. I conclude my remarks by congratulating all the esteemed contributors to these two books, including my own colleagues in Shivaji University, and by extending best wishes to the books launched today. I am sure that these books will add an altogether new perspective in the domain of Gandhian studies and research, and will remain a valuable reference and source books to become seriously acquainted with the life and works of Mahatma Gandhi. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Maharaj.
Thank you so much for showing us ways in which we can collaborate in the future. I'm sure we will take up some of those opportunities that you've mentioned. With that, I would like to introduce Dr. Chandrakant Langare. We are developing a friendship, and Terry has tied us together. He's the co-editor of both volumes, and he's at Shivaji University in Kolhapur, India. Thank you.
I'm audible to all. Very good morning, all, and very good evening as well. At the very outset, I acknowledge sincere thanks to the Mahatma Gandhi Center for Global Nonviolence, James Madison University for hosting this very meaningful, very momentous academic gathering of the virtual book launch of our two books. In fact, I don't have privilege to talk on Gandhi because I'm not a Gandhian scholar. But when the proposal came, I talked with Professor Beitzel. I told him that, shall I suggest you a very good name from India who can assist you? He said, no, you should be there. My concern with Gandhism is only through teaching of literature, Gandhian literature. I taught his autobiography. I taught some of his articles in compulsory English classes for as a communication skills. But one opportunity that I can't forget, in I think 2015 or 16, I don't remember, Shivaji University Gandhi Center organized a very important event on Mahatma Gandhi. That was an international conference, Gandhi in South Africa. And I presented my paper on Hind Swaraj. So that was a vantage point to think, about Gandhi. And then my interest in film studies probably dragged me to this domain. And in fact, I started reading Fatima Mir's book, Apprenticeship of Gandhi. And then I watched Shyam Benegal's films. And then I found that Shyam Benegal's Making of Mahatma is a very good adaptation of Fatima Mir's book. And that, in fact, the point of time when I started thinking of Gandhi. And later on, you know that while going through all the papers, I found that they are very interesting because this was a multidisciplinary book project, and naturally, all the scholars, in fact, their profiles is more greater than me. Because most of the scholars who have contributed seriously to these two books, they are Gandhian scholars, they are directors of Gandhian centers, Fulbright scholars, and they have spent a lot of time in reading Gandhi and his works. In fact, what I gained from this project, I would like to share with you, that I realized that Gandhi is not just an exemplary figure or iconic figure, but he was beyond that, beyond something. Just we heard Professor Parekh telling, or in most of his lectures, he talks about that Gandhi is the most globally known person, because this I experienced also in many countries, in England, in France, in Italy, that when we talk about our country, they say, you are from the land of Gandhi. So this admiration, this is not just enough. But we find the whole world is thinking seriously about Gandhi, and that was our prime objective. It was like revisiting Gandhi's works, life, and reimagining, and not just with single perspectives, but multi-perspectives. And therefore, if you look at the titles, you find that there are, we have chalked out not just appraisal, because we never wanted this book as another brick in the wall. So we wanted this book not as a seminal text even, but we wanted this book a kind of revisiting, which will help many scholars, not just Gandhian scholars, but even scholars who are working in humanities in other areas as well. And I modestly claim that we have fulfilled, I mean, we have met that kind of objective. But I'll be very happy if, because this is a world, there are many people who are Gandhian scholars. I'll be very happy if they could go through the book and tell us about the pitfalls of our book and not about the strongholds, because this will rather help us to further augment Gandhian discourse. And I am of the opinion that Gandhian discourse is a kind of grand discourse. I mean, this is my personalized opinion. I may be wrong, I don't know, but it is an open-ended discourse also, which has helped generations and political institutions. I was doing PhD on Joseph Conrad, and I was reading Anatole France, and where he talked about political institutions. I quote, he said, "No political institution, whether contrived by wisdom of the few or ignorance of many, is capable in providing happiness to mankind." So I don't consider Mahatma Gandhi as a political figure, because while undergoing manuscripts, we came across that Gandhi was a political figure. I would rather consider him as a political thinker. And as Parekh sir has rightly pointed out in many of his lectures, that such kind of check and balance is very much needed. because gone are the days of welfare of the people, and gone are the days, because we are living, as Andre Gide has rightly pointed out, at the very turn of 20th century, that there is a chaos in the realm of human thought. And I think for all this chaos, as Tushar Gandhi has also talked about, do we really need Gandhi, where he has talked about terrorism, global terrorism, sites of violence, so many things which bring pain to the sensitized people. And I think Mahatma, I'm not a Gandhian scholar, but still I'm sharing the quantum of experience that I just gathered out of this kind of editing. And I feel personally that Gandhi cannot be panacea, but can be very much important source for inspiration and amelioration, and that can bring sea change in the societies across the globe. Because in these two projects, we find there are various subjects, and Mahatma Gandhi had encyclopedic range of interest. He was a well-versed person, and above all, he was a human being. And therefore, when I read Professor Parekh's foreword, at the very outset, he has talked about that when Attenborough wanted to make film Gandhi, Nehru warned him that don't make him a saint figure, because he was too human to be a saint. And this is what I also experienced after having gone through all these, drafts. And I found that he is the figure who was visionary and who was much needed all the time. And one thing I would like to speak, and I would like to conclude. I was reading about the debate between Ambedkar and Gandhi, and Nehru and Gandhi. And I realized that Nehru met Gandhi, I think, in Lucknow conference, congressation in 1926. And he was mesmerized to look at this figure. Otherwise, what was his personality? A scrawny, a toothless figure in low-in cloth. But still, Nehru was mesmerized. He has written in his work. And when Nehru was asked that you are the pioneer figure of bilateral relationships, you are the pioneer figure of very good foreign policy, so whom you would like to give the credit? Nehru said that the content is mine, but the spirit is of Bapu. So here we find the way Nehru admitted the significance of Gandhi. I'm not just glorifying Gandhi, because when we were editing this book, there were certain papers which were highly critical of Gandhi. And then we sat together, we talked over phones, and Terry told me that Gandhi's whole life was like open text. Why not we include all this kind without, much hesitation? And I think that is the reason. And one more thing, he said, we have to honor the scholars. And when Terry's demise, it was a great blow to me and to his friends over there, and newly acquainted friends, just like Professor Shrikesar told me that we have very fresh and very good memories of Terry. And I found in him a very naive person, a very gentleman, a Gandhian figure, I would rather say, if I'm not making any flattery. And therefore, Terry's death was a big blow to us. But thanks to Professor Parekh and Tushar ji, who supported me morally and in all way to bring this project, because we were planning to bring this project happen in his birth anniversary. But it took 3 years to complete this project. And I am very sorry for escalating this project, because I was also not responsible for that. Even Terry's demise and pandemic situation, so many hurdles we crossed. But I'm very happy that at least we could bring out these two books when India is celebrating platinum jubilee of independence. I think, and we all know that how important Gandhi's contribution to Indian independence. And one more thing I must talk about my paper. It is based on Shyam Benegal's film, where at the very outset, there is one quote from Doak, where he says that Indians, they do not know much about that whatever Gandhi did in during colonial period or independence struggle. So all the seeds were sown during his 21 years that he spent in South Africa. And I think he became a very human figure, very sensitized figure, and he experimented with global village farms. He took one march, which was a part of which sowed the seeds of Dandi March in India. It was in Natal and Transvaal border. So this is then when I read Fatima Mills' book, I realized that what we Indians need to know is we need to study Gandhi in South Africa. And therefore our university took initiative. Professor Bharti Patil, she organized very meaningful conference, and Tusharji was there on Gandhi in South Africa. Because we know Gandhi, and unfortunately the new generations, I'm not making allegations, but they know Gandhi as a figure on the currency note. But I think that this should not be the thing, and we need to revisit him, revisit his work. And I think just before I conclude, I must acknowledge sincere thanks to all author contributors. I must acknowledge sincere thanks to Professor Parekh, whose forward is very enlightening, is a very good resource, and Tusharji's preface also, because he took stuff and he wrote, he composed that preface after for 4 months. And even Professor Parekh, even 6 months he took. I thought that whether he might have forgotten, but Terry told me, no, he's going through all the papers. So we are so lucky to have such erudite scholars who have penned down their expertise. And this is my sincere appeal to all readers, that don't even just go for the good things in the book. Let us know the pitfalls of our book, and I'll be very happy if the books are reviewed across the globe, because this will help us to go further, or not just to augment Gandhian discourse, but to know, to correct ourselves. So with this note, I conclude. And once again, I am thankful to James Madison people, Timmy Castle, for taking these painstaking efforts to hold this conference, to hold this book launch. And with this, I conclude my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your remarks. I'm sure this book will be reviewed globally. With that, we'll go to Terry's recorded remarks. Like you all, I can't wait to hear them.
The talk about justice has been going on for several thousand years. What I am trying to do now is to think about Gandhi and the application, or what Gandhi might have to say about the 21st century. And I think he would probably have two very important things to say about two issues that I work with directly. And the one is restorative justice, and the other is transitional justice, but different ways to think about justice. The first, I think, where Gandhi, and he did write a little bit about this, but it is in the criminal justice system. And that's from surveillance to policing, to courts, to sentencing, to incarceration, to when a person is released. At almost every point, the system needs to be improved. And I'm speaking most directly of the United States, but of other areas that I've studied as well. And there are so many hopeful things going on. So the criminal justice system, I think, is broken, but I think it can be fixed. And there are many people trying to do this. The second point that I probably won't have time to get into and may be less relevant here as in humanitarian intervention. So what all does this have to do about Gandhi and justice? Here I was told I should insert a joke, but I'm not going to. I will just get more to the boring bits of what I have to say. So, and here I want to talk a little bit about Gandhi's epistemology and ontology, and especially how I've thought about them over the years. And one quote from student of Gandhi is puzzled by many aspects of his life. And I think it was very true, as you mentioned, that he was conducting an experiment of truth. So after reading Gandhi, I began thinking about 4 basic assumptions about the challenges I encounter when interacting with others. And some of this I've written about, some of it I haven't, but I'm going to ask for any of your input here. And there are 4 basic assumptions I think that are very Gandhi-esque. Number 1, we have limited knowledge. Number 2, we often act with a mixture of motivations. We have a number of reasons why we do something. Number 3, we can employ a range of social actions in the process of connecting our motivations with the intended outcomes of social actions. So we have a problem-solving idea of how this would work in our minds. And number 4, all social action has both intended and unintended consequences, including both positive and negative outcomes. So given those 4, I think to various degrees, we can succeed and fail at any one of those points. We can be right and we can be wrong. If we accept the complexity, the ambiguity, and the uncertainty inherent in human motivations and human social action, then we ask ourselves, what approach can best be a guide to help set the parameters for social action? What is, if there is suffering in the world, and we know all of these problems might exist for us addressing them, but we still want to act, what are we supposed to do? How do we act? Maybe Gandhi would say, responsibly in the social world when we ourselves are fallible. And I think that's a very important question to ask. And the world religions give us many very concrete ways to answer this, very thoughtful ways. Confucianism, do not do unto others what you would not like to yourself. Buddhism, hurt not others in ways that you would yourself would find hurtful. Hinduism, this is the sum of duty. Do not unto others what you would not have them do unto you. Islam, no one of you is a believer until he desires for his brother that which he desires for himself. And we could go on with all of the world religions, but very similar to Christianity. So again, we have Gandhi's restatement. Again, said the golden rule of conduct is mutual toleration, seeking that which we shall never all think alike, and we shall always see truth in fragment and from different points of vision. So we still don't know maybe exactly what we're supposed to do, because we're just giving some basic guides. And then right when we think maybe we have the idea, Gandhi says, I lay no claims to superhuman powers. I wear the same corruptible flesh that of the weakest of my fellow beings. I am, therefore, as liable to error as anyone. So, and then he has one more statement that confession of error is like a broom, which sweeps away the dirt and leaves the surface brighter and cleaner. So the first step is, I think, in this process, is to realize that we can easily be wrong. Finally, let's get to Gandhi's definition of justice. And he says that action alone is just, which does not harm either party to a dispute. So it sounds very much like the rich world religion tradition that we just mentioned. Maybe we'll turn now to a little bit more specific problem of contemporary criminal justice, which I think is one area where Gandhian principles can very much apply. We begin to see some contrasts, maybe when we think of the normal way that criminal justice operates and we compare it to restorative justice. So here we could say with restorative justice and with Gandhi, the main concern is with people and relationships. And it's in direct contrast to what most see as the role of the state. For most, the role of the state is to secure property and to punish those who violate the law. So briefly, under the contemporary criminal justice system, we are most concerned with possessions and with following social order, and that is the role of criminal justice to protect those. But if we rephrase the question and ask ourselves, what if we choose to be most concerned with people and relationships, then I think we choose this new approach, restorative justice, but it's rather old too. And I won't go into all the details, but I can tell you that, from what I've read and observed and studied, criminal justice needs to be vastly reformed. And criminal justice tends to be biased against those who are already living at the margins, right? Who are already marginalized individuals. So in this sense, restorative justice is an alternative model, and it concentrates on people and on relationships, and it seeks to address not the crime that was committed, but it seeks to address the harms that were done to other people. So it's not about what law was broken, it's about how was a person harmed. And I think that's a very, very good shift in a way to think about this. And so when we think about people and relationships, so we seek to address the harms that were committed, hold offenders accountable to address those harms, and to build relationships in the process of restoring justice itself. So we can use these offenses and these harms to actually build the process, the end process of what we're looking for the offender. Because what I think we forget sometimes is that people who commit offense and may go to jail eventually return to society. So if we want to think about that, what do we want them, how should they be returning? So if we're going to live with them, what sorts of things should accompany that? And I'm going to give one short story here this was my great-great-great-grandfather, and a story that's been handed down for a number of generations. His name was Benedict Miller, and Benedict was an Amish bishop and a peacemaker. I don't know if any of you are familiar with what the Amish were, but they were in some ways would have been very Gandhi-esque, and they had no electricity, no cars. My lapel would be too fancy. Anyway, Benedict had a corn crib, a place where he stored corn for his cattle. And There was a loft going up, and there was a ladder, a stairway leading up to the corn crib. Well, one day he began to notice that the corn was missing. I don't know how he set this, but he decided to set a trap to catch the thief. One morning while the Miller family was having breakfast, he heard someone shouting from the corn crib asking to be let out. And so Benedict ran out, he saw the man. "Good morning, sir, do you need help?" And of course the gentleman or the man said yes. And then he said, "Could you take me out of this trap?" He said, "I will let you out on one condition. And that is that you come in and share breakfast with my entire family. I will let you out of this trap." So, so the man agreed. And at the breakfast table, said they talked about all kinds of things except the missing corn. So they didn't bring this up. And when the guest finally left, after a very hearty breakfast, a nice conversation with the family, he and Benedict were friends. And, Benedict gave him a bag of corn to take with him. And no corn was ever missing after that point. So here is one way I think that what Gandhi would say, to always think differently about a problem. And here I think is a way when we think about, he could have gotten the criminal justice system involved, but he decided maybe there's a personal relationship that I can build and to get involved. And so that's what he decided to do. We must always be available to different alternatives. Why restorative justice? When I'm thinking about restorative justice in relation to Gandhi, I think these are just two quotes that the first, "Every injury inflicted upon another is a crime against humanity." Thinking about what we're doing when people go to jail, what is that experience like? And he also said, power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 more times effective and permanent than the one derived from fear. And I think that's maybe what the Benedict Miller story was getting at. That here there was, something about the love that was shown to him as a person, and not as a and Peter Gomes said, in his own, Christian way of speaking, that the devil does not bother to tempt us in areas of our weakness, that we are perfectly human to sin there all by ourselves. It is in our righteousness, in our virtues, in the places where we think we can't possibly be wrong, that we are most easily deceived. And I think, I agree here, we easily deceive ourselves with our own virtues and too easily discard the fact that we are traveling through this world with other people. This led me to, I think, another very Gandhian idea, is that rather than debate about the amount of resources we may allocate for certain things, Gandhi would propose that the quality of how we are intervening in the affairs of other people would really matter. It matters less how much money we might be giving. So I think the quality of how we're serving others is what really matters. And here's where I think, how do we do that? How do we do that properly? Because Gandhi said, in the service of others, you will find yourself. But what do we do? What is the quality of that? And I think these are questions, even though I've
So with those words from Terry, which I feel like I would like to hear many, many more times, we move on to Dr. Geeta Dharampal. She's she's the Dean at the Mahatma Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon, Maharashtra, from India.
Good morning and good evening or good afternoon to everybody. My cordial greetings to all the distinguished speakers, to our virtual viewers, and especially to our superb hosts for organizing this very special and inspiring virtual book launch at such short notice and so professionally. I feel truly honored to be representing the contributors of this impressive 2-volume publication, which highlights so magnificently the heightened relevance of Mahatma Gandhi for our present concerns. Dr. Terry Beitzel, with whom I had the privilege of exchanging several emails, did certainly feel the pulse of our times. And despite his incredibly tragic passing away, he has bequeathed to the world, thanks to the efforts of his dedicated co-author, Dr. Chandrakant Langare, a most comprehensive collection of essays on extremely crucial themes about how Gandhi matters today. Indeed, How Gandhi Matters Today truly summarizes, in a nutshell, not only the message, but also the rationale of these 2 momentous volumes. And yet the truth, the factuality of Gandhi's significance has become even more poignantly explicit in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been a wake-up call that spotlights the relevance of Gandhi's clarion call articulated in his incendiary manifesto Hind Swaraj more than a century ago in 1909. To extricate ourselves from the mesmerization of modernity. Considered by him at best as a 9 days wonder, Gandhi even went as far as to discredit modernity's alleged civilizational status as a disease to which we must endeavor not to fall victim. Quite prophetically, prescient indeed, as the coronavirus, a byproduct of modernity, has spread exponentially across the globe to such an extent that modernity itself seems to be in a state of siege. It is slowly but surely dawning on us that our modern globalized lifestyle has made us weaker, more vulnerable than ever. Not only the hubris of modernity, boasting to have conquered disease, but also its scourge of criminal injustice, given the all-pervasive social and economic disparity, have been exposed. Now, at 10 minutes to 12, Gandhi's teachings, crystallized in our 2 volumes, summon us all to adopt a new mindset to save humanity and planet Earth from the impending ecological and socio-economic disaster towards which we are heading. Guided by Gandhi's inspirational example, we are called upon to chart out a viable alternative model of polity that could extricate us from the contemporary impasse. Gandhi's envisioned roadmap of integrating economics, politics, and technology with ethics, or as Terry Beitzel would say, justice, can function as our sheet anchor in these precarious times as we practice a unique variant of globalization, for instance, by experiencing global connectivity within our immediate neighborhood or home office as today in our exemplary virtual book launch, and especially by living in harmony with our natural environment, eschewing exploitative practices as far as possible. To demonstrate for you how Gandhi can come alive today, I invite each and every one of you to visit my home institution, or at least the website of the Gandhi Research Foundation, established by a visionary businessman, Bhavarlal Jain, to enable Gandhi's legacy to impact on today's world for a better future, so that you can really be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for your comments. And now we move on to Professor Vivek Sachdeva from Guru Gobind Singh Indraprasth University in New Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to share our views at the book launch, to contribute a chapter to the anthology on Mahatma Gandhi and engage with his ideas. I thank Dr. Chandrakant Langare and late Professor Beitzel for giving us the opportunity. I also take this opportunity to thank Mahatma Gandhi Center at James Madison University for organizing the virtual book launch of 2 volumes of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi stands relevance to us today more than ever. The chapter I and Professor P. Pradhan co-authored engages with the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar and Bhagat Singh. In the first half of the 20th century, different leaders were reflecting on the ideas of India. It is apposite to go back to the debate of the nation in colonial times to understand different ideas of India in post-colonial times. The common strand among them was not merely their fight for the political freedom from the British rule, but also their continuous attempts to define what freedom meant to them, what vision of India they had, what kind of nation state they wanted India to be after independence. They have debated on different ideas of India from their respective ideological positions. And another reason of discussing them together in one chapter was that they came from different backgrounds and intersected with each other at one point of time in history. This chapter engages with 3 major ideas: the idea of state, the debate of violence and non-violence, and the question of untouchability in India. I shall focus on this idea of state in this small talk, and my co-author will focus on other aspects of it. Well, many of Gandhi's ideas were rooted in the ethos of Hinduism. Gandhi envisioned emancipation at all levels in the concept of Swaraj. Gandhi believed in ordering of karma and earth within the bounds of dharma. Swaraj to Gandhi was both a liberation of an individual and a political being. The ideas of Gandhi can be implemented in a liberal society imbued with humanism. In Gandhian views, there is no room for exploitation of any sort. Gandhi combines religion and politics not to achieve any communal goal, but to espouse righteousness with human action. B.R. Ambedkar voiced his reservations and fears of the Hindu majority. And it's important to engage with the debate between these 3 important political thinkers for us. He disagrees with Gandhi on the question of Swaraj. To Ambedkar, political emancipation is not possible without removing social inequalities. Ambedkar's understanding of an ideal society is largely influenced by the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Agreeing with Professor Dewey, he defined democracy as another name for fraternity. In fraternity, social osmosis is the most important aspect. Interlinking democracy and fraternity, Ambedkar states that fraternity is the only another name for democracy. Democracy is not merely a form of government, it is primarily a mode of associated living, of conjoint communicated experience. It is essentially an attitude of respect and reverence towards fellow. Ambedkar appropriates liberty to not only include the right to life, limb, and property, but also liberty to choose one's profession. To him, to disallow this liberty is to perpetuate slavery. Bhagat Singh, on the other hand, envisioned not only political freedom from the British rule. His idea of total freedom is espoused with his dream of a classless India free from caste oppression, economic exploitation, and oppressive state in a borderless world. Bhagat Singh's utopia was to see man getting freedom from all kinds of oppression. He revisited the idea of Vasudev Kutumbakam and interpreted it within the frame of socialism. He envisioned the ideal of universal brotherhood, a world based on equality of all races, creeds, faiths, classes, and castes. Besides throwing away the foreign rule, Bhagat Singh also contributed to the idea of systematic reconstruction of Indian society. He thought of a world in which human character is ennobled not by fear of hell or the promise of heaven, rather by man's own will. So if we look at the ideas of these three figures, Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Bhagat Singh, despite their differences, they do have some common meeting points. Mahatma Gandhi espoused righteousness in politics for a just society. Ambedkar envisioned emancipation of the untouchables. And Bhagat Singh dreamt of a free country free from all kinds of oppression. Gandhi's state is based on principles of Sarvodaya, whereas Ambedkar was fighting for complete social democracy and emancipation of the low caste, and Bhagat Singh was struggling for a socialist state. The issue these thinkers engaged with from their respective positions in colonial India offered different alternatives, which is a legacy of an independent, democratic India even today. The debates, the issues that Mahatma Gandhi talked about, he raised, and the way other thinkers also responded to, including Ambedkar, Jawaharlal Nehru, Bhagat Singh, I think that debate is still relevant for us. There are so many issues where we find that Mahatma Gandhi and other thinkers of those times, they stand relevant once again in the present times. With this, I invite my co-author to throw some light on the other aspects of the argument. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vivek. Carrying on with what Vivek has said and what we have discussed in our chapter, I would like to draw attention to two important aspects of this particular debate on a nation that India should be today, which is very pertinent, are the issues of caste and the question of non-violence and ahimsa. An important area of disagreement between Gandhi, Ambedkar, and Bhagat Singh was the issue of the caste system. Gandhi did not sanction bringing about complete structural change of the Indian society and politics. He intended to make minor changes in the Indian society without disrupting the existing order. This was central to Gandhi's approach to settle the issue of the low caste in the Indian society, a matter of contention between Gandhi and Ambedkar. Gandhi considered the issue of untouchability as an internal matter of the Hindus and a religious issue. Ambedkar, on the contrary, read it as a political and economic issue. In B.R. Ambedkar's understanding, the caste system in India, and I quote him, is a degenerated form of the Chaturvarnya, which is the ideal of the Hindu. In his opinion, all schools of philosophy such as Vedanta, Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika have been hovering around the Hindu social order without questioning it. In Ambedkar's opinion, without ensuring social democracy and freedom to the low caste, a democratic form of government will not be sufficient to ensure what Bhagat Singh used to call complete freedom. The idea of democracy is erected on the principle of equality. A society which in a systematic manner excludes a significant section of the society, denying them fundamental human dignity, cannot guarantee that principles of democracy are followed in letter or spirit. Before bringing the structural changes in the form of government in India or introducing democracy as a model of governance, thinking along the lines of Ramadei, Ambedkar wanted to see social democracy first as a reality in India. Ambedkar considered the caste system as a stumbling block in emergence of the Indian nation state. Among Sikhs and Muslims, there is a social cement which makes them bhais. This is what Ambedkar said. Hinduism did not evoke this sense of fellow feeling. The multiple social hierarchies destroyed this sense of fraternity in Hinduism, which is not conducive for a modern nation state. I quote Ambedkar again, so long as caste remains, there will be no Sangathan. And so long as there is no Sangathan, the Hindu will remain weak and meek. It leaves Hindu feeling alone, as caste leaves one with no public charity. All this is reserved for one's caste. A Hindu's public is his caste. Bhagat Singh also questioned the practice of untouchability in India, which has been sanctioned by the institution of Hindu religion, a debate that makes Bhagat Singh sit next to B.R. Ambedkar, who has been a vociferous critic of Hindu social structure. In his essay, Achut Da Sawal, or the issue of untouchability, which Bhagat Singh wrote in 1928 under the pen name of Vidrohi, Bhagat Singh deliberated on the issue of untouchability in India. Understanding the complex entwining of class and caste in Indian society, he gave a call to the low caste people to unite, and I quote, "Don't become fodder for others. Don't look at others for help, but beware. Don't be trapped by bureaucracy. This capitalist bureaucracy is the real reason behind your slavery and poverty. You are the real working class. Workers unite." His idea was Vishbandhuta, free from narrow religious or national boundaries. His ideal of universal brotherhood or universal love envisaged a world with no class or caste-based or race-based oppression. India's growing in strength and attaining freedom from the British rule was a prerequisite in achieving universal brotherhood, but that was not the complete story. The ideal of universal brotherhood was not an excuse for the weakness of any race. In Bhagat Singh's understanding, as long as there are rulers and the ruled, the exploiters and exploited, the oppressor and the oppressed, the ideal of universal brotherhood cannot be achieved. The equality Bhagat Singh imagined demands social, political, and economic equality among all races, creeds, faiths, classes, and castes all over the world. I quote, "How can universal brotherhood and universal love flourish till the time this vocabulary of black, white, civilized, savage, ruler, ruled, rich, poor, high caste, untouchables, etc. continue to be used? This message can be delivered only by a free people, and enslaved people like the Indians cannot even mention it." Gandhi and Bhagat Singh have also been seen on the opposite end of the scale on the question of violence and ahimsa during India's freedom struggle. I briefly touch upon it. Rest is there in the chapter. Gandhi was in principle against retributive justice. Gandhi's concept of ahimsa entails entertaining no ill thoughts towards anybody. Thus, his understanding of ahimsa was not only at the physical level, but mental and spiritual too. Ahimsa or non-violence was a means for Gandhi to realize truth. Though Bhagat Singh used violence in his struggle against the British colonialism, but as a revolutionary, he believed that revolutionaries cannot use violence recklessly. His famous quote on revolution, I quote, "Bombs and pistols do not make a revolution. The sword of revolution is sharpened on the whetting stone of ideas." Bhagat Singh declared in his last prison writings that "I'm not a terrorist, and I never was, except perhaps in the beginning of my career. And I'm convinced that we cannot gain through these methods." Without clarity of thought, Bhagat Singh did not approve of the use of violence. He did throw a bomb in the Legislative Assembly hall, but it was a smoke bomb. His intention was to make the deaf hear, hence the sound was louder. Unlike Gandhi, ahimsa or non-violence was not his second religion. In conclusion, in this entire chapter, the attempt has been to bring forward the debate of the nation during the colonial period, which stands equally relevant in the present times in the wake of changing social, economic, and political spheres of India. Most of the issues continue to be unresolved in post-colonial India. The issues these thinkers engage with from their respective ideological positions offer different alternatives, which is a legacy of an independent democratic India. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my views.
Thank you so much for your comments. Now we'll hear from Mr. Pranit Rawat from the Rawat Publications. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah. For us at Rawat, Gandhi studies has always been one of our key interest subjects in publishing, because you'll find Gandhi all across social sciences domain, be it sociology, history, literature, political science, philosophy, education, and so on. There is no denying this fact that these volumes on Gandhi are of utmost importance in the contemporary world scenario, where we are undergoing multiple crises, including economic crisis, political conflicts, war situations, social crises. I think relevance of Gandhi will never ever fail. It is indeed our proud privilege to be associated with Professor Beitzel and Professor Langare in this academic endeavor. I still remember having met Professor Langare in a conference where he floated this idea of publication way back in early 2019, and how Terry was so keen to get these volumes published by an indigenous publisher from the land of Gandhi. It's been over 2 years now, and the final product is now in your hands. I hope you'll appreciate this. It's hard to imagine the kind of effort Professor Terry and Dr. Langare have put in this project. I congratulate each and every contributor of this volume for making it such a rich feast for any Gandhian scholar around the globe. However, we at Rawat are deeply grieved to have lost Professor Beitzel on way. This project was so close to his heart. We thank Mrs. Beitzel and JMU Gandhi Center for their close association in this project and organizing this book launch. Thank you once again for patronizing us. We look forward to more such associations ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now to Dr. Taimi Castle, our Interim Director for Mahatma Gandhi Center for Global Nonviolence. She's also a professor of justice studies here at JMU. Over to Taimi.
Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. So I would like to thank all of our Indian colleagues and friends for attending the event and helping us to honor our late director, Dr. Terry Beitzel. As I mentioned in the chat, the recording will be available on our Linktree website. I posted that in the chat, but I will do so again once I finish here, because all of the links will be there. We have to wait for Zoom to convert this before we can put the recording up there, but it will be also on our Linktree. I would like to just take this moment to say thanks to everyone again for joining us. Just because this was our memorial to our late director, we miss him dearly. I also want to thank the Gandhi Center affiliates and the board members and the students who have supported us in this endeavor. but special thanks to Community Advisory Board member Sylvia Whitney Beitzel, who you've seen on camera today. She was integral to putting this book launch together, including the PowerPoint and editing the video of Terry. So thanks again. In peace from the Gandhi Center. Sorry, I forgot to hold the books up. So we'll have the link on the link tree. I'll post that in the chat now, but you will be able to order the books with the Indian link, and we also have a USA link. Thanks everyone, especially our esteemed guests. Thanks for joining. Just a second. Somebody's knocking on the door. Hi. Yeah, I think Smith was down there, but she probably locked it on her way out. Yep. Oh, okay.
Wait, let me introduce
Okay, all right.
I'll introduce you to Tiny. Tiny, are you there?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so Sylvia, sorry, hold on.
Oh, it's okay. I just want to introduce you to my brother.
Hi.
This is Rob.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
How are you? Good morning.
Good, how are you? It's nice to see you.
Yes. Yeah. Well, on behalf of Professor, on behalf of my sister and our family and Terry's family, thank you for putting that together. Thank you very much. That was very informative.